Hey everyone, welcome to our recording of our YCKC session. This topic will be on authentic femininity and masculinity, and we'll be going over Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body, modesty, and what it means to be a true woman in today's culture, what a man looks like. We'll also speak directly on how to raise boys into men. We'll talk about the fall of Adam and Eve and how their sins that they committed have been passed down to women and men today and for the rest of time. This session ended up being about an hour long, which is kind of what we were hoping for. I started recording right after our initial introductions and meeting everyone. Brooke and I talked about our lives and how they've changed a lot since our last meeting in May. It was kind of a last-minute thing to record this. We learned that several people couldn't make it, so we thought that this would be a good way to share. I've omitted some of the Q&A discussions, just because you can't hear the questions. Questions were just too far away from our mic. But occasionally, if they're close enough and you can kind of hear them, I did add subtitles in so you can kind of see the questions. But however, if you do like this content, consider coming to our next session on September 25th. Again, if you like the content, like it on Facebook, share it with your friends, and we're trying to cultivate a youth group that's able to tackle complex subjects like this. So again, this is delivered in a youth group setting, but I think everyone could learn something new by listening in. Brooke and I certainly learned a lot while studying these subjects. So without further ado, the live recording will start now.
Best to direct you to someone that does. And then also we'd invite you to come to our session in a couple months. We're going to go more into like dating and courtship and that kind of thing. So it might answer some of those questions you have after this. But without further ado, tonight we'll be diving into femininity and masculinity, what it means to be male, what it means to be female. But in order to really understand what it means to be male or female, I think it's first helpful to understand why do we even have bodies in the first place. So,
luckily for us, this is exactly what Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body's teaching seeks to explain. So Pope John Paul II, aka JPII, from 1979 to 1985, he gave these talks about who we are as humans and how who we are relates to God's plans for us in the world. So when we say theology of the body tonight, we're referring to JPII's teachings. So let's jump in. If we look to Scripture and the teachings of JPII's Theology of the Body, we can draw 4 main points from his work. Point number 1, God made this world on purpose and out of love. So your life has meaning. You were created for a reason, and that reason was for God to manifest himself through you. So let's explain that. So one thing we know is that God did not create out of need, but love. So love wants to show itself and reveal itself and manifest itself. Think about when there's something inside you you're super passionate about, it kind of burns within you and you need to get it out in some way. So this might be through music or song or writing, etc. So, well, for God, he had this love inside him so great and infinite that he wanted to express it through creation. More specifically, the creation of humans, of all you guys in this room. So God gave you bodies. God created your bodies so he could visibly manifest who he is on the inside, which is love. JPII says, quote, "The body and only the body is capable of making visible what is invisible." Our bodies were created to make visible God and his love.
all right, so that leads us into our second point, and that's God made humanity in his likeness and image. All right, so what is God's likeness and image? Well, God is love. So what does that mean for us? If God is love and we were made in his likeness and image, well, then we can infer that we were made for love. We were made to give love. We were made to receive love. Overall, we were just meant for love. And so our next point, 3, God made human beings a body-soul composite. So you are your body and your soul combined. The two hold equal weight. We're not just our intellect and our feelings, and we're also not just a collection of atoms and cells. We are body and soul. So basically, you are your body. If God made this world with purpose and reason, then there is a reason we have bodies. And there's a reason we were created to look the way we do. So,
given these 3 main points, we
Number
can
1.
infer these 3 points here. Brooke, you want to read them?
To recap, God made this world on purpose and out of love, number 1. 2, God made humanity in his image and likeness. And then 3, God made human beings a body-soul composite. Given
So-
these 3 points, we infer...
What we do with our bodies matters. So, our bodies have purpose. We were created male and female for a reason. And the way we were created male and female, aka the way we look on the outside, helps us infer what God desires for us on the inside, or basically how he desires us to live and use our bodies.
Too long, didn't read. Our bodies matter. Period. Queen. So, before we move on, do you all have any questions?
I'm gonna
Not a question.
statements.
Okay. So, after learning this, how does this just change the way you all, like, maybe view your bodies or might treat your bodies going forward? Any examples?
That's okay.
I guess like just honoring it by even just like exercising.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like it. No, it's good.
Taking
Yeah.
care of it, yeah.
Yeah.
taking care
Okay.
of it.
I like it. Just something to reflect on. Don't
Yeah.
have to answer.
Mhm.
Eating, yeah, like eating
cream.
ice cream.
Yes.
Treating yourself.
All right. So we've learned that there's a reason that we have bodies and that what we do with our bodies matter. So if this is true and JP2 is right, then there's a reason we're both male and female. Okay, so we're going to jump into that now. How the visible aspect of our bodies reflect God's unique call to each other based on our gender. So tonight we'll be discussing both authentic femininity and masculinity. There's a reason we didn't divide you guys into groups, male and female, because we wanted to combine everyone into one group. We wanted men to know what authentic femininity looks like, so you can look for it in a wife someday, and we want to help the women in your lives in this journey to live out authentic femininity. So we want the women to know what authentic masculinity looks like on the flip side. So that way you can look for that in your husband someday and uphold your brothers in their journey to live out authentic masculinity. So,
Welcome, Edna.
hey Anna.
All right. Welcome, Edna. So before we get started into the femininity section, I handed out a piece of paper to everybody. I want you to write on that piece of paper what you believe masculinity and femininity are, or like what it means to be a man or a woman. Edna, here's a little. No, you want some?
So while you're writing that down, here's a quick video.
Yes.
So what is a woman?
Why do you ask that question?
I just really like to know.
What do you think the answer to that question is?
Well, I'm asking. That's why I came to a college professor who's this is what you do.
What other kinds of answers have you gotten?
A lot of like this where you're not answering, and I've gotten a lot of that. So
I think it's interesting that you say that some of the people you've interviewed have been reluctant to answer it, and I think that has a lot to do with the questions that preceded it and the way that you've conducted yourself in the interview.
how have I conducted myself?
How do you think you've conducted yourself?
You just really don't want to answer the questions, do you?
I came today very willing and enthusiastic about answering questions about women's and gender sexuality studies, which is
So
the
you
work that I
wanted
do.
you wanted to answer questions about women's studies, and so shouldn't the first answer you should be able to provide is what exactly is a woman?
Well, for me, it's actually a really simple answer, and that's a person who identifies as a woman.
But what are they identifying as?
As a woman.
But what is that?
As a woman,
Do you know what a circular definition is?
I do.
It's sort of like what you're doing right now, where a woman is a woman.
Well, because you're seeking what we would call in my field of work an essentialist definition of gender. I think it sounds like you would like me to give you a set of biological or cultural characteristics that are associated with one gender or the other.
I'm not seeking any type of definition. I'm just seeking a definition.
Yeah, and I gave you one.
All right. So some of you might have struggled writing down what it means to be a man or woman. And no wonder, right? Like, we live in a society where even professors will not give you a straight definition of a woman. We live in a world where we hear that gender is fluid. You can choose whether you can be male, you can choose whether you can be female. So I really do feel for everyone in this room when I say it's tough out there. It's tough to live authentic femininity because we live in a world that can't even tell us what a woman is. So, what is a woman? More importantly, what makes a good woman? So in a world where Selena Gomez and Kylie Jenner are the most followed women on Instagram, you might think that a good woman is just someone who's physically beautiful. Well, if you're like me and you don't look like either of those women, you might be feeling a little discouraged. You might just be feeling like you're not enough. Well, this feeling of not being enough is one of the ways the devil attacks. Women, the devil tells you and wants you to believe that you are not enough. You're told that you're not skinny enough, you're told you're not curvy enough, you're told you're not pretty enough, your nose is too big, your hair is too thin, it's too curly, you don't dress cute enough, you're told you need to sacrifice everything for a good career so that you're never in the position to be in need of a man. You're also told you need to be better than the woman next to you, at whatever cost. You're even told that you need to be better than the man sitting next to you if you expect to go far in any career. And you're told that if you somehow beat oppression and go far in that career, then you will finally be truly happy and satisfied. And being tied down with a husband or being a mom and tied down with kids is going to get in the way of all the true happiness you might feel. And maybe you're in a position where you're listening to these voices. I know I have been, and there's still some in there that I do today.
So tonight we're not going to focus on those voices, those lies. Instead, we're going to go back to what God and the church say. So in the current cultural war, which pushes men and women to view women as mere function-oriented objects, the church stands firm. So the Catholic Church and God, they love women, and they believe that women should be valued, protected, cherished, and respected. In a culture where some prefer pets over children, well, we celebrate Mother's Day by affirming that a woman's perfection lies in embracing her true feminine identity. What is true feminine identity? If we look at Scripture, we can read it here. It says, "A good woman is hard to find and worth more than diamonds. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at time to come. A charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised."
So this leads us into our first trait of the night of being authentically female. So an authentic female, above all, is a daughter of the Most High. And guess what? Every woman in this room was born with this trait. Ladies, we don't have to create our own identity through how we dress, what we do for fun, what we're studying in school and how well we do it, what we post on Instagram. All these things are good in right order, but just small parts of our identity as daughters of the Most High. We don't have to create our own identity because we have already received it through God our Father. We are beloved daughters, and nothing ever changes that. For before He formed you in your mother's womb, He knew you. And before you were born, your Heavenly Father set you apart. So that leads us to the second trait of being authentically female. An authentic woman is called to clothe herself in virtue. God calls us not to clothe ourselves in Lululemon and Old Navy and Altered State. Don't get me wrong, I love all of them. But rather calls us to clothe ourselves in virtue. And men, you're called to clothe yourself in the same virtue, so kind of tune up here. If we look to Colossians, we read, "Put it on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. And above all of these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony." Alright, so a woman of God is one who clothes herself in virtue. And if you look to the slide here, there are numerous virtues you can put on, so to speak. One of the virtues we, as women especially, have the responsibility of upholding is the virtue of modesty. God has given us all women this great gift of the ability to receive and grow life within us. So at the moment we conceive a child, God is literally touching our wombs. Though we've been given, because this is such a great gift, it's also a really big responsibility to keep here this dwelling place for life. So the current feminist movement wants you to believe that you're oppressed. And yes, it's a lot easier to go saying that you're oppressed and that it's someone else's fault than to admit it's not your own fault. It's easier to say that you live in a patriarchal society where men have an unfair advantage. However, if we believe we're oppressed, then we believe that we are not responsible for our actions or our outcomes in life. We believe that we're not good enough, essentially, that it's a man's fault if we're not treated with respect. That is essentially what the feminist movement today says, but that's just not true. Women, you are strong and lovely. Yes, men should respect women. They should not look lustfully in our direction. However, women, we are the keeper of our bodies in this dwelling place of life. We are responsible for our bodies, and we are called to stand in purity in both body and soul, because our bodies, as mentioned, are directly tied and just as important as our souls. Therefore, we are called to act and express ourselves in that same purity and mystery, more specifically through the virtue of modesty. So, it's important to note that modesty is not just a set of rules for how to dress, but rather it's more like a disposition of the heart. So, for example, you could be clothed head to toe and still have a modest heart, just like you could be naked with your spouse and still have a modest heart. True modesty isn't about shaming a woman's body, but instead it's a virtue that calls us out of ourselves to glorify God in how we dress, speak, act, think, carry ourselves in general. Because our bodies, they're not our own, right? They're God's. Our bodies are God's expression of his love for us. In Corinthians we read, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You're not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." Yes, so above all, modesty is a disposition of the heart. However, that doesn't mean that how we dress is not important. It's said in the Bible that even if a man looks lustfully at a woman, he has committed adultery. This is a really serious sin. So women, protect your brothers. Carry yourselves in a way that inspires reverence and respect rather than lust and use. You may not be married yet, but you're still called to serve the men in your life. And it's not degrading to serve. The feminist movement wants you to think it's degrading to serve your fellow man. They want you to believe that men are pigs and it's their fault alone if they're looking at us like with bad intentions. But Jesus himself said, "I have not come to be served, but to serve." How can anyone meditating on these words come to the conclusion that to serve, which is a form of love, is degrading? Rather, service was the totality of Jesus' purpose of his life on earth. And we as women are called to live as Jesus, in serving our brothers by dressing in ways that reflects the mystery and hiddenness of our body. We are able to not only protect them, but also inspire them to protect our bodies through their love of us, to inspire them to view and treat us with respect and love. And ladies, isn't this what we truly want, right? Not to be used, not to be made out with at a party, or used for pleasure in a one-night stand, or told we're hot or responding to an inappropriate picture from a guy in our class, but to truly be loved and respected by a man, to be chosen by a man of character and God, not just sent a late night "what's up" Snapchat by some guy in your class hoping to get something for nothing. To be intentionally asked on a date rather than being one of the hundreds of girls that he's Snapchatting and stringing along. If this is truly what you want, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it is, then demand respect. Demand respect through the way you carry yourself, the things you post on Instagram, the way you talk, the way you act, dress. Because women, you are beautifully and powerfully made. We are called to dress with modesty. We're called to dress with care. Not because our bodies are bad, but because they are so, so good. We are called to protect them from being seen solely as objects. I can't sit here and tell you what it's okay to wear, what it's not okay to wear. I'm not going to sit here and lecture you on that. But I am going to ask you to look inwardly with complete honesty and ask yourself, anytime you put on an outfit, am I dressing this way to draw attention to a certain part of me? Because we are not just parts, right? We are a whole person, and we are called to dress in a way that glorifies our whole body and soul self. Women, you are not oppressed by man. Rather, the history of civilization could be written in terms of the level of its women, which is pretty powerful. So stand in dignity and humility and strength as daughters of the Most High. We have been gifted with the beautiful responsibility, and may the grace of God help guide us through it and uphold it.
Got it.
All
I'm
right.
going to keep going.
Yes.
I got a slide.
So for our next trait of what it means to be a good woman, we are going to look at the theology of the female body, or the way the woman's body looks. So if we first look at the theology of the female body, we learn that God literally designed a woman's body to be his own dwelling place. Woman's body from the beginning have been created to receive life. So that leads into our third trait of how we're called to be authentically female. An authentic female is called to receive. So if we look to our bodies as women, we see that they literally reveal the truth of this third trait. All of our reproductive organs are internal, and only women are created with an empty space within, because we are, created to be receptive, to be life givers. We make a gift of ourself so that others can receive the gift of self, their very life. Our bodies bring into being something that never existed before. If we look to the Nativity, we see that woman's body literally became heaven on earth when Jesus entered Mary's womb. Woman's body was created to be the dwelling place for the Most High. It is destined to reveal the dwelling place of God. I mean, how beautiful is that? As women, we are meant to receive. We are created to receive God's will, life, spirit, in our life, and from it create life. All right, so a woman goes into their husband's bachelor pad and makes it a home. These are not Matt's house, by the way. This is not Matt's house.
It's a representation of Matt's house.
It's not Matt's house.
I thought you was done.
All right, but you all have seen the pictures. Mattress on the floor, not a piece of furniture in sight. Maybe the cooler's a TV stand or something like that. I don't know. But a man sees no problem with that. A woman receives that man's dwelling place as it is, accepts it, goes in there, and makes it a home. We don't just have to have children or husbands to receive and be compassionate and caregiving. We can be a safe spot for all who need us. A good woman doesn't shy away from receiving a friend or stranger who is hurting or afraid. She receives them as they are with empathy and love, listening to them and creating life in them they didn't know they had. A good woman fears the Lord and receives his plan in her life with joy and strength because she trusts him deeply and receives his love so easily. A good woman receives. That's why you often see women in the role of like educators or nurses or healthcare providers. In these roles, women thrive as they can fall into their natural gift of receptivity. They're able to receive a child, for example, and form in them knowledge, or receive a patient and then return into them life. A good woman receives. And this receptivity that we are created with leads us to our next point. An authentic woman, because of her beautiful gift of receptivity, is called to the highest calling, which is motherhood. So if you're a created female, then your body tells you you have been called to motherhood. You've been called to receive life, to bring life into the world. Now, this doesn't just mean you're called to be the mom of a human child. If for some reason you cannot bear children, you can be called to spiritual motherhood, as well as sisters or nuns. Historically, sisters and nuns were essential to the church's life, complementing the works of priests by addressing spiritual needs. So to be a sister or nun is a beautiful call and such an important role in the church. The value of spiritual motherhood is often misunderstood in a culture that undervalues natural motherhood. With declining birth rates and the rise of abortion, the role of spiritual mothers might seem less relevant. However, a genuine desire for motherhood is a longing to be a perfect woman, a sacrificial desire to nurture and form new life. But unfortunately, modern women often search for happiness within themselves alone, and they fall further away from this true calling that will actually bring them joy. So, as mentioned, a woman's natural receptivity promotes their empathy and ability to receive and love others on a more spiritual and personal level. Women are literally designed and structured differently than men so that we can fulfill this role of both physical and spiritual motherhood. So there's a modern study, for example, that shows that women can listen to many things at once. That is, like, our concentration is designed to cover a multitude of things, but superficially. Whereas men are designed to focus on one thing at a time and tune everything else out. This is why a guy can sit in front of a computer and play video games, and his GF can come up and talk to him, and he doesn't even hear it. I mean, like, she's not even in the scope of his focus. However, this ability to focus is also necessary and good for men. For instance, like if they were to go to war, they have to be able to tune everything out and focus on the task at hand. Women, on the other hand, were not designed this way. We're designed to be able to listen to a number of things at once, and that comes in handy, like, if we have kids, because we can, like, hear what one child's saying, but also kind of tune in to what's going on with the other kids. So, one of the things that makes us such good mothers is our emotions, which leads us to our next trait. A good and authentic woman has control over her emotions. So our strength in women, as women, is in our emotions, our ability to love, to empathize, and to tune into the emotions of others. Our emotions are what gives life. And for this reason, our emotions are one of the things Satan hates most and tries to attack. And he's attacked women and their emotions like this from the beginning. So, I mean, if we look back to the story of Adam and Eve. So in the creation of Eve, as soon as God created Eve and presented her to Adam, Adam knew no other thing was like Eve. He saw her immediately and recognized she had the same nature as him, and therefore the same dignity. In addition, Eve was created with an inclination to serve or to help her husband. She was created for him. And being created this way, God gave Eve a natural inclination to be concerned about her appearance. So ladies, it's not like a bad thing to be concerned about your appearance. We're kind of born with that like natural desire. It's just bad when it becomes the most important thing and disproportionate in our lives.
Okay, I'm going to give Brooke a break.
Thank you.
So, at the fall, during the fall of Adam and Eve, Satan went after Eve because women, as mentioned, are more ordered towards the emotional life. This is not necessarily disorder, but, it could be a powerful and beautiful thing. For instance, emotions are, they're a mother's strength as they allow her to empathize with the children and direct their emotional and psychological developments. Or, they allow women to comfort a friend where a man might, not know what to say. A woman sees someone crying and gives them a hug and talks it over with them. And emotions are beautiful. So men, on the other hand, they're not as ordered towards this emotional life. For instance, if a man was in charge of the children all the time, if the child falls down, the guy, because it's, a condition of a male to deal with things that are difficult, just ignore them and continue to pursue what the right is. He sees the child fall down and he scrapes his knee, and most men will, realize, okay, intellectually, I have to take care of the child, but they don't really empathize with the child. They just say, oh, well, suck it up, deal with it, come on. And, whereas the child, when they're younger, at a, formative stage, they need a woman to empathize. And recognize this is a sorrowful thing that's happened to me, but at the same time, direct it to the right end. That's why women have a much more intense emotional life. A woman's connection to her emotions is one of the reasons why Satan he tried to appeal to Eve first rather than to Adam, because if he knew he could get to Eve, he could appeal to her emotions and he could undo Adam. So in the garden, that's exactly what Satan did. We read, "When the woman saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it." So she listened to her emotions and desires rather than looking at the truth of the matter that, which was God had given her everything she could ever want, and she didn't need this fruit, but Eve didn't think that. She just listened to her emotions. Still, we see Satan. He's attacking women's emotions in society today. For example, oftentimes you'll see people reposting or posting things on their Instagram or whatever related to radical anti-God movements. So one example is the pro-choice movement. Often, not always, it's generally a female friend posting this, prompting these radical movements, because Satan knows women are more likely to feel sorry for others and they want to help the friend in need. And so he used these radical movements to appeal to their emotions. So Satan wants women to allow their emotions to rule their lives, unchecked by reason or logic. Emotions aren't bad intrinsically, but they do need to be kept in check. They cannot be our God. Again, if you're an OG YCK goer, you'll remember the demonic back in our spiritual warfare section. The demons have control over our emotions to the fullest extent. So they can make you feel any way they want to about something, such as feeling good about going to Mass, or feeling good about the way you dress, or constantly comparing yourself to others. So demons have full control of our lower faculties, ergo our emotions. This is why we can't always trust how we may feel about something. So, because Eve, she chose emotions as her God, women, they face these repercussions today. So because of her fall, the emotional life of women is harder to maintain. Eve ate the apple, and in this, she broke her submission to the natural law of Adam and God. Eve then gave the apple to Adam and tried to get him to do what she wanted rather than letting him do the right thing. She tried to manipulate Adam and control him, and that's what Satan's still trying to get women to do today. They use their emotions to manipulate and control men rather than to love them. I mean, you just look at modern TV shows, and the dad is always portrayed as some dumb, lazy, overweight guy, and the wife is portrayed as someone who, has to have control over that man and manipulate him and to do whatever she wills. So society tells women they have to control men because we can't trust them to do it the right way. So what Eve should have done is gone to Adam first and said, should we eat this? Because she knew it was going to affect them both. But because she broke her submission to Adam, women now, until the end of time, have this disorder from original sin to want to get away from the submission of their husbands and even resent it. So this resentment, this disorder of trying to break away from, your fellow man is what the modern feminist movement plays upon. So when the devil attacks, he often seeks to separate. So we should always be leery of a movement that is divisive in nature.
Luckily for us, though, Eve's fall was not the end, for where Eve fell, the Virgin Mary rose. She entered the world a daughter of God, just like all of us, daughter. She upheld virtue long before Christ was born, most notably the virtues of humility and modesty, and maintaining her virginity and keeping her womb as a pure, unblemished offering and dwelling place to God himself. She received God's will in her life, where she could have been like Eve and rejected God's will because it was not pleasing to her. She received it and said, I am a handmaid of the Lord. She didn't let her emotions overcome her. Because, I'm sure she was terrified. She was pregnant, not married, in a time where that was, it's not praised now, but it was really frowned upon back then. So I'm sure she was scared. But she didn't allow her emotions to rule her. She became the mother of the Son of Man, thus allowing God's perfect plan for salvation to unfold. She became the new Eve, in a sense, and has laid out the path for women to achieve authentic femininity today. She is our model, our mother. Women and mothers should stay close to Our Lady in a rosary to receive the gift of her authentic feminine intervention in our lives. So women and men, for that matter, we should quit looking to ourselves and the disordered appetite for what will make us happy. We must instead look to how Our Lady, the Virgin Mary, lived our life. We must look to God. All right, so to conclude this section of femininity, I want everyone in this room, picture the woman you love and respect the most. Just I'll give you a second. Picture who that might be in your life. All right, so what about these women that you've pictured, what about them do you respect and love?
Strong or kind.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Patient, yeah.
Very quietly strong.
Yeah.
Empathetic, in control of emotions, like you said, but deep down very emotional, in a good way.
Yeah.
Empathetic.
Yes.
Anything else?
Awesome.
Awesome. Super cool.
Yeah. So,
What you have all described are examples of virtue. What you have all described are beautiful examples of what it means to be a woman of virtue in today's world that hates virtue. So, not one of you said, oh, she has a super hot bod, or her Instagram is super aesthetic, and, she got chosen by a certain sorority house. Oh my gosh, that's why I love and respect her. No, those things are not the totality of who we are as women, and they're not why we are respected as women.
okay. Should I read that or no?
Nah.
Okay. Here we go.
On to masculinity.
God's vision of masculinity. So,
Is that Ryan Gosling?
it looks like it, yeah. that is it. Okay. So here we go. The devil, on masculinity, he attacks men by making them lazy. So Satan disrupts your life with meaningless things, activities, hobbies, to draw you away from your role as male, which is to provide for your family. Men fail to die to oneself and give up things that they enjoy, like new phones or nice cars or expensive hobbies, expensive both in money or time, such as, hunting, fishing, sports, dirt bikes, video games, whatever, you name it. All of it in moderation is fine, but sure, if a man has gone, all day, say he's fishing all day or playing video games or TikTok or feeling his earthly desires, sure, he's happy, but he's failing to provide for the family monetarily and spiritually. he's actually trending effeminate. So this is a trick from the devil, and why masculinity involves dying to oneself, basically giving up your desires to put your family before you. So sure, you might not have wives or children yet to provide for, but you can start thinking with your masculine mindset now to be adequately transitioned into the role of husband or father someday. So first, we need to break down and look at the current state of masculinity. It it doesn't take much to see that masculinity is in a terrible decline. So there are actually very few men left. And effeminacy, which we'll be discussing at length today, is the normal for guys. So in fact, finding a man who isn't effeminate is rare these days. So anytime a man with any semblance of masculinity appears in the media, both he and his reputation are viciously attacked to prevent any image of true masculinity from emerging.
Madison.
I have a good talking point about that later.
Yes.
A good example.
You can bring it now if you want.
If you want to bring it
Yeah,
down, it's fine.
bring it up now.
Have you guys? Has anybody seen that one girl on TikTok who's like, she's got like 8 kids and, you know, very traditional wife duties, and she kind of like vlogs it, lives on a farm.
She like living
Ballerina farm.
Yeah.
Ballerina farm.
Everyone is roasting her, and they're like, this is not where she wants to be. She does
She's-
not want this. She's trapped. Her husband is
Yeah.
so scary. Like, he's
She wants to be a
keeping her.
ballerina.
She wants, and that's fine if she's got another dream, or you know, maybe
Yeah.
she does it in her free time. But like, maybe have we ever thought about the fact that maybe she's fulfilled too?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe she's not trapped, or
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just so crazy.
Yeah.
It's blown up.
No,
I'm
it's
glad
yeah.
Austin recognized that.
Ballerina
No,
farms.
yeah, the ultimate fulfillment does come from motherhood. So
Yeah. If anyone has thoughts, like what Madison just did, just raise your hand and speak them as well, because that was good.
nice. Okay, so we are going to answer the question today, what does a true man look like? So there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially in certain cultures where, you know, what passes for masculinity is actually effeminacy. This is something that we need to discuss. So when Adam and Eve fell, several things happened, resulting in the effects of Adam's sin being passed to all men. So the church fathers, they say that Eve committed 5 sins and Adam committed 8 sins during the fall, though the fathers often discuss specific defects in men resulting from the fall. So what's the definition of effeminacy? St. Thomas Aquinas defines it as an unwillingness to put aside one pleasure to pursue what's arduous or difficult. Later, he defines sloth similarly as an unwillingness to put aside one's comfort to pursue what is difficult. The difference, however, between sloth and effeminacy, sloth is an aversion to hard work, while effeminacy is an attachment to pleasure. So, when Adam fell, he committed the same 5 sins as Eve. One of these sins was inept joy, which means he took pleasure in something he knew was wrong. When he looked at the forbidden fruit, his lower appetites delighted in his appearance, even though he knew God had commanded him not to eat it. So instead of dying to himself and obeying God's command, he took pleasure in the fruit. And this disobedience destroyed the gift of integrity that he once had. This act gave his appetites independence, leading him to pursue pleasure over reason. When Eve handed Adam the fruit, some church fathers suggest that he chose to eat it because he didn't want to be separated from his wife. Again, he chose the pleasure of being with her over obeying God. This set up a dynamic in which most men allow their wives to rule the household because they prefer peace and pleasure over doing what's necessary to lead a rightly ordered life. So when God asked Adam what had happened, Adam blamed both God and Eve instead of taking responsibility. This lack of responsibility is another form of effeminacy, which is a problem that all men have faced since Adam's fall. So today, effeminacy is widespread. Men prefer their own pleasure over doing what's right or difficult. This is evident in how rare it is to see a man sacrifice for himself and for his wife. Interestingly, women will never respect an effeminate man, even if they happen to enjoy having them under their control. They'll never respect them. So on the other hand, women naturally want to submit to a man who exercises rightful authority and is a true man. So one reason for today's rampant effeminacy in men is that our culture is too easy, it's too simple, and it's too pleasurable. So technology in particular contributes to this by providing pleasure. So men who are, naturally inclined to enjoy tools, they find a great pleasure in using technology, but this constant pleasure weakens them. So 50 years ago, a man who, reached the age of 18 and he wasn't mature enough to assume the responsibilities of marriage, that was considered abnormal. Today, many 18-year-olds are so immature because they spend their lives pursuing pleasure instead of developing masculinity. They sleep in late, they play video games, they surf the internet, they watch TV all day, and all of this provide constant pleasure, sure, but they prevent them from building virtue. So, in conclusion, maturity comes from pain and responsibility. Suffering and responsibility are the foundations of masculinity. Unfortunately, our culture's focus on ease and pleasure, this is undermining the foundations, leading to the widespread effeminacy that we see today. I'll keep going if you want. So, the very nature of masculinity is self-sacrifice. St. Thomas Aquinas, he says that one thing God wants from every rational creature, whether angelic or human, is the sacrifice of their will to his. Self-sacrifice is integral to being a man, more so than even for a woman. So, although women, they sacrifice, they do so in a different way. God created man to engage in things that are hard, difficult, which require denying how you feel in order to achieve something greater. So after Adam fell, by taking the easier route, God decreed that man would have to work by the sweat of his brow, making life hard and painful, with the responsibility of supporting his family, particularly his wife. So these challenges are the means by which men grow up. They learn to embrace suffering and responsibility. In order to be responsible, a man must put himself aside and do what's right. He must be willing to suffer and do what's right. To find fulfillment as a man, he has to master himself to the point where doing hard things, taking responsibility, comes second nature. There's a certain delight that comes from performing acts of virtue, not necessarily pleasure, but virtue. Saints and philosophers like St. Thomas and Aristotle, they spoke of the delight found in virtue. A true man, they achieve this by doing what is difficult without complaint, understanding the pain and effort necessary for the greater good. God told Adam that he had to work by the sweat of his brow, which means embracing what is painful to achieve what is good. Self-love is effeminate because it seeks pleasure in loving oneself. A real man must put that aside.
So, you just look to the cross, you're seeing the exact inversion of the fall of Adam and Eve. Adam didn't deny himself the pleasure of eating the fruit, and so now he has to work in thorns. Christ, crowned with thorns, assumed this burden. So Christ's carrying of the cross and the sweat and blood on his face that St. Veronica wiped exemplifies what it means to be a man. Christ is the ultimate man because he embraced exactly what builds masculinity, setting aside his human nature to achieve salvation for humanity. This is why priests are supposed to be men. Women aren't called to that same kind of sacrifice. Men are also called to work in the workforce and, when necessary, to go to war because it's hard work. Pornography in all its forms is effeminate because it seeks unrestrained pleasure without any form of sacrifice. To be a true man, we must understand what a man is and how to get there. A true man is characterized by self-sacrifice, especially in relation to his wife and children. If a man can't control himself in relation to the sixth commandment before marriage, then he won't do so after marriage. It will only get worse. Men must sacrifice themselves for their wives and their children, providing and protecting, not just physically, but also spiritually. The primary person a man has to protect his wife from is actually himself, because she's more likely to suffer injury from him than anyone else. A true man doesn't count the cost in terms of pain, but considers what needs to be done to achieve good for his family. Self-sacrifice is essential. A man must also be virtuous, particularly in his temperance. If he can't put aside the pleasures of food, drink, and women, he's not a man. He's selfish and he's effeminate. Real men protect women from themselves, putting aside their own pleasure for the good of women.
So today, many boys, they're growing up miserable because their masculinity is being suppressed. God designed us with natural inclinations, and when we go against nature, it causes dysfunction and misery. So when men think primarily about themselves, it's effeminate because that's not how we're designed. Women, on the other hand, they're naturally more concerned with themselves because of their role in childbearing and supporting the family. This concern for themselves, when properly ordered, is generally for the sake of the children. A real woman thinks about her children, not just herself. So a fallen woman thinks of only herself. So happiness for a woman comes from not herself, but her family. A true man finds doing things difficult fulfilling. So he enjoys the satisfaction of a hard day's work because that's what he was designed to do. Men should excel in fortitude, while women excel in temperance, especially chastity and modesty. A man must also be just. This involves sacrifice, but it's also the virtue of religion. Nothing's more frustrating than a man who dismisses prayer as women's stuff. Prayer's hard, which in turn makes it masculine in a way. So what matters, of religion, when they're ceded just to women, it's a sign that masculinity has collapsed among the clergy. So a man who doesn't prioritize God is trending effeminate. So a man must maintain authority in the home and not cave to effeminacy, even if his wife wants to usurp his authority. This usurpation is a sin that stems from the dynamics seen in the story of Adam and Eve. A man must exercise authority with calmness for the well-being of his family and not out of a desire to dominate. So a true man does not pursue peace at the expense of his authority. Peace brings a certain pleasure, but it shouldn't be the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal should be do what is spiritually best for everyone in the family. So authority is meant to protect and provide for those under him, not for the sake of the person who holds it.
We're considering making t-shirts at some point. This is one of the potential design options. If anyone else has some other t-shirt designs, send them our way. But, Christian extremism.
Yes.
Anyway, go on, Tyler. Sorry.
Shredded.
Memes
Yeah, I'll take that off.
Still have the watermark in there.
Maybe on the tag.
Maybe so. I'll shoot a shout out. Don't worry. So, in the traditional movement, some men they seem to be rediscovering their role as an authority figure. They struggle to exercise it properly due to a lack of virtue and presence of effeminacy. This is why raising men is crucial. So your wife and children are not there to serve you. They're equally responsible for everything in the family, from washing dishes to supporting the family down to changing diapers. Men need to do this stuff. God gave men helpers, not slaves. So women are there to help men accomplish their responsibilities, not necessarily to be servants. The right one. So men should excel in prudence. Prudence is a virtue. It requires the ability to judge what is right in a specific circumstance. Women are designed for more sensory assessment and intuition, while men are designed for more abstract thought. When men allow their emotions to dominate their thinking, it compromises their ability to be prudent. A true man judges objectively and does what's right, regardless of how he feels. Finally, a man must have meekness. This is a virtue. It is the opposite of anger. So anger, the definition of anger is a complex passion involving a perception of injury and a desire for vindication. So the pleasure derived from vindication is a form of effeminacy. So a real man, he can take blows and keep standing. Christ, the ultimate man, was meek and humble of heart. So a man who is quick to anger is often compensating for his own weakness and insecurities. So, in summary, to go over what we just said, a true man is self-sacrificial, virtuous, just, prudent, and meek. He finds fulfillment in doing what is difficult serving his family, and serving God. A real man puts aside his own pleasure and emotions to do what's right. Embracing suffering and responsibility are essential components of his masculinity. One of the reasons why it's unwise to give your son everything he wants without making him earn it is because it deprives him of the opportunity to learn what it truly means to be a man by facing these challenges. So boys, they must learn by example. And say the father is absent, gone, he lacks masculinity, or so on and so forth, it becomes difficult for the boy to grow into manhood. Typically, one of two things happen to these kids. Either, he becomes effeminate like his father, or he tries to overcompensate and seek to prove his masculinity in unhealthy ways, such as bullying others. It's crucial to moderate the work. If you do raise kids and boys someday, it's crucial. You don't want to give them too much work. You don't want to give them too little. Say he must, as a father, a boy must witness his father practicing theological virtues. So he must see him praying. He understands that being a man involves rendering God what is just and not necessarily just indulging himself. So a father should not just be sitting idly while the mother is praying. Instead, he should look for a model of virtue and self-discipline. So boys, again, with the meekness, they must learn that when things don't go their way, they need to figure out how to moderate their anger. So growing up, if something didn't get expected, you lost your temper, there's consequences for that, and it was a lesson growing up and dealing with life. So they must also learn humility in these matters. Technology should be used minimally, only when necessary, and should be seen as a tool, not a toy. So by exercising virtue and self-restraint in these areas and receiving appropriate rewards, a boy will learn to moderate himself. Initially, parents, they probably enforce these rules, and they should, but eventually the boy must take responsibility for his own self-regulation. And now we're talking on recreation. It should be viewed as a means, not necessarily an end. So Aristotle said that we engage in recreation for pleasure's sake because it recreates the soul when done in moderation. However, excessive recreation dissipates the soul. So mothers must resist the urge to shield their boys from suffering, as it's essential for their growth into men. Unfortunately, some women actively try to destroy masculinity, often due to their own self-hatred. Worldly, not godly feminism, at its core, is about self-loathing rather than fighting for women's rights. Being a woman is a perfection, just as being a man is a perfection. There's no reason to feel bad about it. So, you want to go?
Yeah. So feminism, however, often tries to erase femininity and to emasculate men to avoid the discomfort of being reminded of their own gender and perceived weakness. Key word perceived there. Because women, like our strength, lies in our weakness. Because it is through our weakness that God's power is made perfect. This is tragic because femininity is beautiful, not just physically, but also psychologically and morally. Men must be willing to suffer, and women must allow boys to become men, which involves letting them experience hardship. Responsibility is another key lesson a boy's got to learn, and he's got to see his father maintaining authority in the family. If the father surrenders, the boy will learn to take the easy way out. He must see his father exercising authority responsibly, or he may grow to resent masculinity if he perceives his father's actions as unjust. I know no one in here is fathers yet, but maybe someday you will be. So conversely, seeing his father's authority used properly will teach him that true masculinity involves self-sacrifice for the good of others, not just self-indulgence. As the boy grows, he should be given responsibilities appropriate for his age and abilities. If things don't go well, he should face proportional consequences so that he learns accountability, and that teaches him that life is about growth and responsibility. It's crucial for him to see the fruit of his labor. Making him work constantly without any reward will make him feel like a slave. But if he doesn't work, he'll grow up thinking everyone exists to serve his needs. This is a major issue with the current generation, as many young people expect a big paycheck without working hard for it and believe that they're entitled to it. This mentality kind of stems from being told that they're owed something simply from existing. However, parents only have one obligation, and that is to raise their children to adulthood with spiritual and physical well-being. A boy must learn to take care of things under his charge and take pride in seeing them thrive. This will later translate in taking joy in seeing his wife and family flourish. He needs to understand the value of his contributions to the family, even if he doesn't get the full benefit of his efforts immediately. He must also learn the proper order of authority by observing his mother submitting to his father, and his father loving his wife for her submission. As he enters his teenage years, he must learn docility and prudence by following the correct order. This can be challenging for a boy, for example, in homeschooling situations where teenage boys may feel too old to be under their mother's authority. However, the fourth commandment mandates respect and obedience to our parents, and a true man submits to his mother because it's hard and because it cultivates virtue. A father must step in during this phase, reinforcing that being a man means obeying your mom, as part of the 10 Commandments, by the way. At the same time, moms must avoid treating their teenage sons like children. If a mom asks her son to do something prudent and necessary, he will eventually appreciate the opportunity to help and will grow in love for it. A real man finds joy in the virtue of piety and pleasing his parents. One of the challenges with teenage boys is their desire for independence. However, true freedom begins with conquering oneself internally. External freedom, such as leaving the home or getting married, comes later, but this internal self-discipline and self-control are the foundation of the real freedom this boy desires. If a boy insists on doing his own thing and thinks he knows it all, it's a sign of immaturity. He just needs to man up and submit to his mom, as required by the 10 Commandments.
So, ultimately, what we're trying to say is the goal is to develop virtue in boys. They need to learn what the virtues are, they need to learn how to obtain them, and how to take delight in them. Not merely pleasure, but in the satisfaction of what's doing what is right and remaining steadfast in it. So by the age of 18, a boy should have developed the moral and mental habits necessary to see things clearly, ensuring that his judgment is not clouded by emotions and that his intellect is guided by faith rather than feelings. This goal can only be achieved through responsibility and suffering, both of which are essential parts of growing into manhood. So lastly, we're just going to kind of touch on femininity, masculinity within the family structure. So men and women were made for relationships. God created man for woman and woman for man. From the side of Adam, man found his perfect helper in Eve, and, quote, "Alas, this is the flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone." The unity of man and woman in marriage literally reveals and makes visible Christ's love for the church. God is a family, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, an eternal exchange of love and communion. In the creation of male and female, we're seeing God make visible his invisible love through the family when he commands Adam and Eve in Genesis 1:28, which reads, "God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and every other living creature that moves on the ground.'" So God literally made the mystery of the Trinity visible, because in the union of the two there comes a third through the bearing of children, just as the union of Christ and the Father comes the Holy Spirit. So what does femininity and masculinity look like within the structure of marriage, within a family? Well, to answer that question, we'll look through Ephesians 5, which is something that was covered last week at Mass. This is one of the more triggering passages of the Bible, if you interpret it incorrectly, but it's actually one of the most beautiful and freeing passages if you interpret it as intended. So, go ahead.
So, it says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything." Now, most people stop here and they get triggered. However, if you read literally the next line, it is outlining in length how husbands should in turn treat their wives. It says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of this body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So, wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives. This is often a verse met with a lot of anger. People turn up their noses. They're like, what? Submit to my husband? No! But Pope Pius XI clarifies that a wife's obedience actually aligns with reason and dignity and does not diminish her role. Okay, I'm going to poll the room now. I want everyone to close their eyes. This is not a trick question. Just answer whatever comes to your mind first. Alright. Would you rather be loved or respected? I want you to hold up a number 1 if you'd rather be loved, and a number 2 if you'd rather be respected. Alright. Open your eyes. You'll see, well, someone put your fingers down. There's like some differences, obviously, but most of the time when you ask people this question, you'll hear women saying that they'd rather be loved and men saying they'd rather be respected. Obviously, not everyone's the same person, but that's kind of a general theme that we see. So if we go on to read that infamous verse, we read, wives, submit to our husbands as to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up to her. In submitting to one's husband, a woman shows him the respect he so deeply wants. You know, most men want respect. And then in giving himself up for his bride as Christ gave himself up for the church, a husband is able to give his wife the love she really wants. And also to mention, like, love and respect often come hand in hand. So if you're like a girl and you put up a 2, or a guy and you put up a 1, the two are often hand in hand. So don't feel like, oh, I'm effeminate or whatever, you know.
All right. So men, they should strive to inspire through love, making submission a natural response of the woman rather than a demand. So, ladies, if a man was literally willing to die for you, to serve you, to love you, just as Christ did for the church, would your natural response not be respect? And men, if a woman looked to you for advice, for direction, treated you with care, and truly listened to what you say, and treated you with genuine admiration and thoughtfulness, it would be impossible not to love her. So, American Catholics often find obedience challenging, and I believe there are a few main reasons for this. So first, the scandals within the church. They've shaken many people's trust. Second, Protestantism on the rise with its infinite emphasis on personal interpretation of the Bible and independence. That's influenced the cultural mindset. Lastly, the crisis of fatherhood, both within the church and within society, has weakened the natural understanding of leadership and obedience. So addressing these requires a deeper look at obedience within the church, particularly areas that might provoke discomfort. So a significant point of discussion is the notion of women's submission. This is often emphasized in traditional circles, but it's crucial to approach this topic with nuance and understanding for the broader context. So like in France, you know, they are a traditionalist country. They don't even think about this. Obviously, the women submit to the husbands there, but it's just a United States thing. So the approach to the family dynamics differs significantly across countries compared to the United States. So St. John Chrysostom, which is a church father, he provides valuable insight into this issue. He emphasizes that husbands should love their wives with the same sacrificial care that Christ shows the church. This love should be so profound that it even outweighs the wife's submission. Husbands are called to endure struggles and offer their lives for their wives, winning them over not through domination, but through deep love and affection. So, Pope Pius XI, he further clarifies that a wife's obedience does not mean blind submission to her husband at every whim. Instead, it means harmony with him and reason as her dignity as a human being. This means husbands must treat their wives with respect, not as subordinates or as children, This concept is exemplified by Dietrich von Hildebrand's daily act of love for his wife. If you want to say something,
Yeah,
Brooke.
and like just to note too, like that doesn't give us as women to just be have permission to just be like, oh, whatever my husband wants, you know. Like we're called to have dignity too, and to be honest and strong as well in that submission. Like it's not just, oh, I'll just follow his every whim. Like no, God gave you an intellect. He gave you your lives leading up to this point. Like you respect him, you love him, yes, but you also are honest with him, and don't just act like the child, you know, in the relationship.
So, yeah, this Dietrich von Hildebrand, he's got a lot of writings on this, and his daily acts of love for his wife illustrate the kind of service and humility that a husband should be and what a relationship would look like with his wife. And Brooke has read a book from his wife. Was it Alice von Hildebrand?
Yeah, his wife writes like a really good book on authentic femininity. If anyone's interested, just shoot me a text or come up afterward, and I will
So
show
you can look into his writings and his wife's writings for more inspiration on the subject. So, obedience, whether it's within the family or the church, it's not about following rules. It's about embodying Christ's love and sacrifice. This applies to men in role as husbands and fathers, but also to priests through their relationship with their parishioners. True leadership is not about asserting authority, but inspiring others through selfless love, much like Christ did from the cross. Finally, the example of Mary and Joseph demonstrates how mutual love and respect make obedience a natural and joyful act. Joseph's tender care for Mary made it easy for her to follow his lead, not because of any obligation, but because of the deep love they shared. This is the model for Christian families and for all relationships within the church. Leadership through love, service, and humility. So,
All right, so we gave you those papers at the beginning. We're going to wrap up. I know we kind of went over a little bit.
we started late too, but
Yeah, kind of got into it late. But now I want you to take those papers and write on it what you believe true masculinity and femininity mean to you now. I'll give you a second for that.
perfect hour.
Yeah, dude, right on the tune. And as you kind of wrap up writing that or thinking about it, feel free to just kind of share, or if you do need to leave, we're not going to be offended, you can leave too. And as you all finish them up, does anyone want to share how their thoughts changed from the beginning to now? Or if they didn't, that's okay too.
Didn't really have thoughts at first.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Didn't really put anything down, but after this, basically I just wrote down what you guys said. But like provider, receiver, all the traits that a man is supposed to have versus a girl.
Nice.
Modesty.
Yes.
I was listening.
Excellent.
Yes. You explained it well.
I can tell you were listening, yeah. Anyone else's opinions changed throughout?
I think when you posed the question at first, it was still like, I don't know. But
Yeah.
very I went straight to biology.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I didn't have an answer at first, but now if let's say I was being interviewed by that fella, I think I would be able to say something. So.
Yeah, the first time I watched that documentary, I was like, I don't really know. You never actually answered it, but yeah. Nice. Anybody else?
I just wrote down what you guys were saying. I read a book before.
Oh, cool.
Like that one, not completely, but it was close.
What was the book?
Actually, I haven't finished it. What's his name? How to date without losing your soul.
Oh yeah, I've seen.
What's his name?
Is that the Jason Everett guy?
Yes, Jason
Yeah.
Everett.
Okay.
Him and his wife.
He's good.
I haven't finished it yet. The first chapter.
Yeah.
We were actually able to go to one of his talks in
Oh,
Jeff
nice.
City, back in March, about that and stuff.
Yes.
So, but I wrote down
That's awesome.
that the man takes care and provides for the wife, and then the wife takes that he has provided to her. Takes care.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
It is.
That's deep. I like that, yeah.
Basically,
Austin basically said all.
I put provider, receiver.
Which one's which?
Well, you know. It's definitely conflict.
And then one other thing I kind of want to ask y'all before we like disperse is, what's like one thing you can do tomorrow to step further into your authentic masculinity or femininity? Like, what's like a tangible step you think you might be able to take? Austin.
Maybe I won't stay up till 3 with Eli Walker and playing Fortnite.
That's a good step. That's a good step.
It's tangible, yeah.
Yeah, super tangible. Gabe, was that
I
something?
don't know about
Did you say-
Exactly, I don't know, man.
Anybody else? Matt, is that a hand up? Did I see?
I like a lot what you said about emotions being
Yeah.
our biggest strength, but also our biggest weakness. So
Mhm.
maybe whenever like you feel kind of overwhelmed with those emotions, just ground yourself in a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. Very good. Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. It's gonna be one of those things, just a little bit better each day. You know, always striving. Anything else from anyone before we close up? All right. Thank you all for coming again. We can close in a little Hail Mary and be on our merry way. So,
Yes.
Father, Son,
Father,
Holy
Son,
Spirit.
Mary,
Hail Mary,
full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
now and at the hour of our death.
Amen.
All right. Thank you guys so much for coming, and help yourself to any